Good afternoon and welcome to this special edition of In-Depth School and Community. It is Sunday, March 15th, the Ides of March for those historians out there. Hopefully that doesn't tell us what's going to happen for the Concord Public Schools. We like to think of it as a reverse. It's going to be an omen of good fortune. But I do need to tell you we're here for a very important reason. We're looking at uncharted territory in terms of how we're going to be able to provide educational opportunity for all of our students pre-K through 12. I have a very distinguished panel here to talk through some of the issues that we've been wrestling with in hopes of coming up with a really good plan to be able to meet the needs of our students over the next 3 weeks. As you may know, the governor has just issued a declaration that all schools will be closed at least until April 3rd. So we need to have something in place that's going to meet the needs of our students. So let's meet our panel. First, on the very outside is Mr. Jack Dunn, who is our business administrator. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you, Frank.
Next to him is Ms. Katie Scarpati. She is the principal of the Millbrook School, and she's going to talk to us about the pre-K, K, and first grade programs. And then rounding out our distinguished panel is Ms. Kylene Chalauskas. She is the assistant principal at Concord High School, and she'll talk to us about the upper end and what's happening with our high school folks. So let's begin with you, Jack, if we could. So obviously a lot of swirling action here about what to do, when to do it, and how things are all going to come together. Tell us a little bit about what's been happening with you over the past week as we've looked at this enigma before us.
I think a lot of it has been the hourly change in what this whole process has been. Everything that we talked about on Friday and trying to get to what we're going to do this week has all changed within a matter of 48 hours, and every hour it seems to be changing. But it's really focusing on the support staff that helps the teachers and the administrators in making sure how's the pay going to work, what do we need to support our existing staff, what do we need to support the students at home and those that are the most fragile.
Let me interrupt you for a second. You raised a really important point because I know we've all been fielding a lot of phone calls and emails from parents and from fellow staff members. And one of the issues is over this 2 or 3 week period, because it's going to be very different, are we going to get paid? Is our schedule going to be the same? And I think you and I had this conversation and the answer is unequivocally
yes.
Thank you. Everyone's going to get paid.
We are going to pay the staff. We are going to keep staff working. The other piece has been concerned with families as far as food. And we're working on implementing a food program to be able to develop that so that there's a pickup and delivery out to the community if necessary. That will utilize our existing bus infrastructure as well as our existing food service staff. Was on the phone with them this afternoon. They are ordering additional supplies to be able to create bagged lunches and bagged breakfasts so that people can pick up and we can work on doing deliveries if necessary.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Now, Katie, you deal with a number of folks who are on free and reduced lunch. And I think Jack is telling us that the governor or maybe even the feds have now determined that because of the unique situation we're in, everybody in a sense is going to be on free and reduced. So for Jack, in terms of monetary issues, this really takes it off the table. But more to the point, what's really good about this, Katie, is a lot of the people that you need to make sure get lunches and breakfast, they're going to get them starting on Monday. And more importantly, they can come to the school anytime from, I think, from 11 to 1, correct?
I think so, yep.
Yeah, and they just come to the front office. And so if it's Kylene and she wants to get lunch for her son, she comes into the front office. The lunches will all be arranged there. She picks up her lunch. And if there's a breakfast, too, that she needs to get, she can pick that up, and that'd be tomorrow's breakfast. And then off she goes. So no one's going to actually be in the building. Kylene, as a parent's not going to be walking around meandering looking for the lunchroom or things like that.
Right. She'll just enter at the office, and someone will be there to greet her and make sure she gets the lunch and breakfast.
Now, Donna Paley came up with a really interesting idea. So not just having the lunches at the schools, which obviously most people are familiar with, but also bringing the lunches out of the school to certain designated areas around the community. We just need to make sure we let folks know where those areas are. And I think, Jack, you're working on that with Terry?
Correct. We're working on that with Terry Crowdy and some of our partners between the Concord Family Y, which is going to be offering childcare, as it makes sense for us to get in there. We have church partners that have reached out to us and to be able to provide meals because under this program we can provide breakfast and lunch. Would there be a possibility for the weekend wagons that are each of the schools to be able to continue to do that on a dinner process as well?
Wow, that's unbelievable. That's great. So what you're also indicating, Jack, is that this is not just a school issue, it's a community issue. And maybe you could talk to us about some of the conversations you've had with the city folks about how we're going to coordinate and streamline our efforts with them.
Yep, so Tom Espel reached out to us on Friday to to talk about that coordination, offering information from their public information officer. Dr. Bass and I are going to meet with him tomorrow morning to look at what that coordination will look like and what additional support structure needs to be put in place.
Katie, back to you for a second. Kylene, we will get to you, don't worry. Talk to us about, I mean, obviously the kids at the kindergarten, pre-K level, they're not going to have computers and, a technological equipment to be able to use. So how are you going to access learning opportunities for them?
So that's what we spent a lot of time today working on. We've come up with a guideline for teachers, and they will create meaningful activities in all the different subject areas with some options that if your family has a device and you can get online, there are options for that, but then there are also options for paper and pencil tasks or other learning activities to do at home. And they'll go home as a weekly activity, so you'll see what the expectations are for each week with your student.
So Kylene, as you know, has a first grader in your school, and so she says, oh my goodness, but all his materials are at the building. What do I do?
So just as the lunches and the breakfast is going to be available for pickup, we're going to make folders for each student to come and pick up.
Yeah.
And as we see how long this will be, we'll arrange other options. We did talk about just like the food being delivered, that if you don't have transportation, then we have a way to get it out to you in your community too.
Nice, nice. All right, Kylene, now we finally come to you. Talk to us about the high school and some of the plans you guys have been looking at.
So fortunately, the students at Concord High School are pretty familiar at this point with our online platform of Google Classroom, which provides teachers with an opportunity to post lessons, videos. They can even have videos of themselves delivering lessons. And this is a platform the kids have been using for years.
Right.
So this is going to be, for most students, a natural transition, and they'll receive their education through that platform with some additional supports in place. By all means, though, we'll make sure that anything that the kids need, their parents need, we will be available to help them.
You foresee a lot of phone calls, emails, and text messages from parents and students about all this?
We do. I imagine most will be through email, where kids will reach out to their teachers to be wondering about certain lessons, if they're not sure what they need to do, answering for clarifying questions. So we're anticipating that, and we've actually outlined in our plan that teachers will have office hours during their day, so that kids will know when they'll be sort of online, if you will, to answer email questions and so forth and so on.
That's great. So if Jack is a parent or even a student, he knows that, let's assume you're the English teacher, that you're available for office hours of 11 to 2 or 11 to 3, whatever the hours happen to be. And so he, or as a student or a parent, can write to you and say, so this is what I'm understanding, what do you think, and where do we go from here?
Correct. And that's not the only time that teachers will respond. We know that teachers are always at their computers at many hours of the day.
Yeah.
But our hope is that during those times of day, you might get more immediate of a response.
Sure.
And you won't be sitting at your computer waiting to know how they needed to answer those questions at those particular times.
That's an excellent point, because Jack and I as parents might say at 8:30, oh, I got to call the school and find out, what we're doing and what's the plan and this and that. And so as we call for Katie, let's say, to answer, Katie's busy doing something else. She's not going to be able to get back to us. If we announce actual office hours, now Jack and I as parents can say, oh, so Katie's going to be at her desk at 11 to 2 or whatever that time is.
Right.
Now I know a pretty good chance I'm going to catch her.
Right. At least within a reasonable amount of time, say 5 or 10 minutes. If you're working with another student at the time, there might be a little bit of a backlog, but yes, at least at that point you won't be sitting there for half the day wondering about how to proceed with the work.
Right. Now, Katie has another issue that we have to deal with, and that is, so a lot of a lot of teachers are also parents, and they happen to have children who go to other schools. Well, guess what? Those schools are closed too. So now they're saddled with the issue of daycare, basically, and working with their kid. And so we know that we have some issues where teachers will not be able to come in on certain days. We have other issues where teachers may bring their child in for a very limited period of time, as long as they stay within the confines of their particular room. Is that correct?
Yes, and just as you shared, the elementary teachers will also have office hours, so if they're working remotely or they are at home, then we'll know that this is the time that they're available. They'll also be making phone calls out to families once a week to touch base and just stay connected with the kids.
That's great. Now, Jack, you were saying earlier, a lot of folks had written in and they said, oh, that's all well and good that you guys are going to do all this remote stuff, but, the irony is you're going to have faculty in your building the whole time, so how are you going to be able to manage that, knowing full well that large gatherings of people will generate the opportunity for transmission of the virus?
Well, I don't think there's going to be anybody that are in large gatherings from a standpoint. We're not calling everybody together in the auditorium. They're going to be sparse throughout the building.
Yes.
As you know, this building's 535,000 square feet. So
Wow.
when you don't have all the munchkins or big munchkins running around,
Yeah.
it's a lot fewer people in here, so there's a lot more space.
Yeah.
So I think we'll be okay.
I think also we're going to follow the guidelines from DHHS, which
Yep.
says the 5-foot rule, so that like Katie and I can't come within 5 feet of each other. Obviously, there's no physical contact. That's going to limit the opportunity for any kind of transmission. I think on top of that, Matt and his super sprayer
Yeah.
is going to have the building washed down every day. And then in addition to that, we have the hand sanitizers, which are now 60% alcohol. And so we're going to require teachers when they come in to wash their hands with a sanitizer, and when they leave, wash their hands with a sanitizer. And that goes for any guests that happen to come into the building for whatever reason. Now, can we guarantee? No, of course not, but we can certainly limit the opportunity and take as much of a reasonable precaution as possible to ensure that we don't unwittingly allow for a transmission of the virus to some of our faculty or students.
The other piece we have is reinforced custodial staff. So
good
instead of
point,
having
yeah.
the third shift, because typically the kids are there and there's after school programs, with all that being canceled, we've consolidated the staffing to
Right.
be working more diligently during those period of times. There's going to be a lot more custodial staff
Right.
on site at the time to be able to do deeper cleaning of the building.
No, that's great. Now, Katie, the other issue that we're looking at, and I think this came up in the governor's presentation. So, I mean, it's all nice to think that, okay, let's bring the faculty in. We'll spend 2 days. We'll chart out what we think we were going to do, and we'll be all set, and off we go. And as we've already experienced, and just so folks know, we spent all day here today looking at how we're going to approach this issue. It became abundantly clear this is a very difficult process, and there are a lot of things that have to be taken into consideration. And then the last thing we want to do is to put forward a program and then have kind of things fall through the cracks, and it becomes very problematic very quickly. And so, as the governor said, why don't we use this week as a transition preparation time such that actual remote learning and other kinds of activities will begin in earnest on Monday, the 23rd. So that works out much better for you guys, yes?
Yeah, it gives teachers and educational assistants, school counselors, specialist teachers, everyone time to really think about those things that might fall through the cracks and really come up with solid plans and do the best we can to support our students and families.
No, it's great. Now, Kylene, Katie was sharing with me earlier today about, she had a nice little graph there about what people are going to do in each grade level and how it's all going to play out. And Jack and I were talking, and we said, gee, wouldn't it be nice if we sent that out to the folks so they could see how we're thinking about how putting this together? But here's the issue with that, and I think you and I have talked about this before too. So we can do that, but the problem is, especially with a faculty like yours that like to take ownership and pride in what's happening, there's going to be some consulting about what this program looks like. And so despite how nice, and it really did look nice, Katie, I must say, and despite how nice that program looks, there's going to be some shifting along the ways.
There is. However, I'll say even at the high school, we know even for 14 to 16-year-olds, this is going to be a hard transition in thinking about having all of these learning experiences without having the teacher intervene. So we are at the high school also talking about creating some consistency and some patterns about the kinds of learning that they're going to experience so they can get used to that. They're all creatures of habit and like to be able to anticipate what's going to happen. So we have come up with some ideas for how students will see a series of some posts and then an assignment, and there'll be a pattern to that will exist, and we're actually going to recommend that across all of the departments so that the students can get familiar with that kind of a program.
Well, that sounds really interesting. Now, Katie, as you know, has a child at the high school, and she's not sure how this is all going to play out. So why don't you explain to us, if you could, walk us through how that might work for her son, who's a 10th grader, I believe.
Sure. So her 10th grade son has English 10.
Yes.
And as we get into this experience, the English 10 teacher will have some practice work, as otherwise known as posts.
Yes.
It might be a short article to read. It might be a video to watch. It might be the teacher giving a 20-minute explanation. And those would be the practice assignments. And then there will be an assignment they have to do as a result of that. Some piece of evidence to show that they've done those three things. And so that's the pattern they see. A few experiences in practice,
Yeah.
and then something where they have to demonstrate what they've learned as a result.
Does that go department to department?
That goes, we're suggesting that for the entire building.
Got
so
it.
that is what when we speak with our faculty tomorrow morning,
Yeah.
they're just as anxious to learn about all of this as the
I'm sure.
community is
Yeah.
and parents are. And so we're going to talk about this with the faculty tomorrow morning.
Neat. Wow.
And the tech integrators had spent some time working
Yeah.
on that guideline that you saw, and we talked about how each school and each grade level will customize it and provide activities that students are familiar and comfortable with. So even though they're at home, there will be some sense of structure and familiarity with what they're doing.
So, I mean, a question for both of you. The learning modules that will take place. So again, parents are trying to envision how all this is going to work. So normally they understand that, okay, I read a book and I'm going to get a test on it. Or we have a whole variety of things that are kind of thrust in front of us and we have to figure out some sort of plan of action as to how to navigate our way through that. So it's a unified, activity. But this is, uniquely different. Can you talk to us about how at the elementary level this might unfold?
So we have subscriptions to Lexia and Zern that all students have access to. So if they're able to use that at home, they will do those units and those lessons through those two platforms. And then students, for example, for reading, they'll be reading a story and then they might have a graphic organizer or some comprehension questions or something like that that will go along with it. And then for math, they'll have some math games, some fluency practice that go along with the Zern lessons if that's available.
Now, Jack and I remember graphic organizers from our time in graduate school, but you got to help us out. Explain what those are.
So there's lots of different ones. It might have in the primary grades, we might be naming main characters and problem and solution and setting. They might be comparing and contrasting something. So there's
Nice.
a wide variety. And teachers will be able to pick what works best for their kids. They might have a different activity. That was just some of the things we were talking about today.
Yeah.
For the teachers at the high school, we're also going to ease the kids into this, and that the first week is really going to be a teacher's opportunity to do what we call remediation and enrichment, week one. And this is going to be an opportunity for a week for teachers to reach out to students who maybe haven't completed something yet in quarter three and
idea.
could work on that. And so teachers are really going to spend some time this week looking at students that might have missed something, need to still turn something in, and that's the remediation piece. And then the enrichment piece is they'll put on some sort of exciting new kinds of things that some kids could do if they have turned things in. And so we're going to ease into that, and that's going to be our remediation and enrichment week. Then we're going to go into what might be called like a phase 2 with new learning. At the high school level, we do want students to be continuing to access their education while we're away. With support, of course. So then we might enter some new learning where students might start experiencing some of the competencies in the work here at the high school that they haven't seen in full picture yet. But that would be a couple weeks into this. But we're going to focus on the remediation and enrichment first, so it feels a little less, lower stakes, get everybody used to it, make sure everybody is caught up, then we'll get into the new
But
learning.
remediation and enrichment's a good thing,
It's
is
a
it not?
great thing. It's a
Yeah.
great thing. And it's a good place to start so that everybody feels supported
Sure.
and feels like they understand what they need to do to get going.
Yeah, Jack?
I think the other big thing right now, as far as operations of the district, as we know, we have scheduled tomorrow night a public hearing that has been canceled. I have
Good
one on
point.
Thursday that has been canceled. A vote on the budget has been canceled, and we'll be postponing that until after this process. But right now, it's everybody getting together, working with all the staff to try to get things running for the next couple weeks.
Actually, speaking of the board meeting that we just had, I know a message was sent out to all parents, letting them know the board's the notes on the board meeting. But just talk to us a little bit, because I know you're one of the key figures in the superintendent search committee.
Yeah.
I don't know what you can tell us that's not privileged, but it would be great to hear what this means in terms of your process.
So right now, our plan is we had scheduled interviews for this Thursday, and we're going to continue with those interviews, and all the candidates will be brought on remotely. Any of the 16 committee members that cannot attend and would prefer to attend remotely, we will allow them to attend remotely, but we are still continuing on with our process as of right now.
Great. And Kylene and I are on the principal search committee. Why don't you tell us where we're at with that?
We have identified 2 candidates that have, one of which, Mike Reardon, has come in for his visitation, and the other candidate will be doing some sort of a visitation this week.
Yep.
This is a very different looking week, but
Sure.
we will do our best to provide an authentic experience for that visit this week for the other candidate, and then we will be making a recommendation off to the school board from there.
Wow, that's great.
We're getting there.
So yeah, it sounds like what I'm hearing is that even though we have this hiatus, if you will, it's going to last for about 3 weeks, that we're still trying to continue with all the things that we have in place as best we can. Now, aside from the budget process, and obviously we want to have folks, meaning the community, be able to chime in and to say, well, what about this and what about that? And we can't do that yet, so we do have to postpone that. But in terms of the other searches, in terms of providing educational opportunity for our students, that will continue as planned. So that's really good news.
Yeah, and I would say that it's not only the academic piece and the graphic organizers and the English 10 lessons. We know that a lot of students access a lot of social, emotional, behavioral support here in the school district, and we're going to be working with our school counselors, our SAP counselors in the district to really make sure that any student that is also in need for social, emotional, behavioral supports, that they still see us as a resource. And it might look different, but I want families to know that we're here, and they need to reach out to us because we want to make sure that everybody is feeling okay. This is going to be a big change for kids, so we want to make sure they feel supported.
That's an excellent point. I don't know what you can tell us in terms of detail or maybe just like a forecast of how this might look, but tomorrow's show is going to be focusing in on students in need. So I'll have special educators and counselors and other folks that deal with kids who are in need. And as I said in my note to parents, I mean, in need could mean academic, it could mean social, emotional, it could mean a variety of things. And so we want to be able to find a way to meet the individual needs of those children. And that's a lot more difficult than simply creating lesson plans, you know, through technology. So I don't know what you can tell us at this point.
Yeah, I don't have a ton of details, but I just want families to know that we're thinking about all of that. I just don't want anybody to think that it's all about the lesson only in Google Classroom. This is a new experience for us, and we've had to come up with ideas very quick here about how this is going to work. But we really recognize that, you know, we're still here for the kids, and we want everybody to understand that.
Yeah, that's great. Now, Jack, you know, talk to us about, so the fact is, you know, we got this information. We knew we were going to be in a situation where the schools are going to have to close at some point in time. And so you've got, I don't know, roughly 500 employees in the district. Now, what kind of excited me was when all of this started to break, instead of people kind of running for the hills, everybody came together and worked to try and say, okay, how are we going to resolve this? How are we going to get together? What's going to be the best plan of action? And I mean, again, not to belabor the point, but you had a whole bunch of people coming in this morning at around 9:30 or so. And I mean, it's now a little after 4 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon, and we're still here. I mean, it speaks a lot to our dedicated professionals.
They are. They're all very dedicated staff, and I think what we need to ask of the parents and the community is for patience too, because this is so fluid. It changes. Even the staff now, plans that were made today are going to be conveyed to the staff tomorrow. No decisions are being finalized until they're just trying to get ahead of it so we can get started in the planning. The other piece is the economic, that I begin to think about, is the economic impact of this. Because the concern that I start to look at too is we go on hiatus from the free and reduced lunch program, and they create this where everybody is free right now. But then that program comes back. We have to start looking at our city officials and what the impact of the city is. People not being able to make rent. Now they may become free and reduced eligible, reaching out to those families and using the other community resources to make sure, because that's the other wave that's coming, I think. So, you know.
I would just say, to your point too, about everybody coming together, I received emails all last night and again this morning from teachers, and teachers are on the ground already planning, and this is not necessarily all top down in the fact that we have the plan and we're going to impose it upon them either, is that tomorrow when we meet with our staffs, they're going to have ideas about how we can make this even better, and we're really excited to meet with them so that we can make it even better. I have groups of teachers who are starting to create virtual folders with lesson ideas and plans. And so just I think that's really important to know that teachers are sitting at home today, and they have also probably had a 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. day with getting ready for this week.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I mean, it's not just us who've come in and physically have
Yeah.
been here to kind of get things moving, but I think folks have been internalizing this for quite some time and trying to figure out how they're going to, again, navigate these uncharted waters and what's going to be in the best interest of our students. That's always our preeminent concern, what's in the best interest for our students going forward. Jack, you raised an interesting point, and the issue for us is always trying to connect up with parents. And as I mentioned to many of you, I was on the phone for quite a bit of time yesterday, fielding phone calls and emails from parents, and I think it's important for us to answer those. But I think as we go forward, I want to make a public address that please contact your building principal. Any issues you now have, because the plans are not coming from the central office, they're coming to the building, and the building is generating those plans. And so I would ask that parents contact the building principal either by phone or by email, and whatever questions they have about their child's learning process in that particular building is where the question should be directed. If there's a particular reason why I need to be involved or Jack needs to be involved, the building principals will certainly let us know. Katie?
I agree. Feel free to reach out with any questions. Just like you said, we've had lots of staff members reaching out and saying, how can I help get food out? What can we do to support the community at large? So we're ready to just be here and help through this uncertain time.
Yeah, and again, the other public address we would make is, don't hesitate to call. If you're not sure, make the call. If you don't know the right person to call the building principal. They'll help direct you as to where you need to go. If you need to speak to Jack or me or any other member of the central office, also feel free to either call or write. We'd be glad to try and answer your question as best we can. Although I might say at this point, as things proceed, we'll probably direct you back to the building and the building principal because they're going to have more firsthand knowledge about what's happening with your particular child. Again, I want to say that we're trying to do this in actually 3 parts. So tomorrow the show will be about students in need, and we'll try and cover all the variety of needs that our students have and how we're going to best address them over this next 3 weeks. And it might be a little bit different than what we talked about today. The third show, which will air on Tuesday, will be a show that will bring back Jack again. And this time we'll have Tom Aspel and other members from the city side coming over and talking about the communication, the streamlining, and coordination, triaging many of the issues that the community in general, want to hear about. Where are the testing sites? How do I access certain medical personnel that are going to be most advantageous to my particular situation? There are financial considerations that I'm sure folks have. And then just being able to be in a position where folks know who to go to, whether it's at the school or on the city side, about what to do during this very turbulent time. And all of us are in the same boat. We have no idea what the next day is going to bring for us because everything has come to almost a complete standstill. It's a national emergency. It's a state emergency. Most folks have been asked to stay home. There's no more travel, at least to limit the number of travel. And one more public address if I could. Obviously, while we're on break for these 3 weeks, please limit the opportunities for travel. The more people you come in contact with, the more likely there will be an opportunity for transmission of the virus, and obviously we don't want that. It is our hope that during this hiatus and during this kind of social distancing, self-imposed quarantine, if you will, that the disease will begin to crest and then go down the other side, and hopefully by April 15th or so, it should be gone because of the warm weather. We don't know that for certain, but DHHS is very hopeful that we may be seeing the last of it by that time. But we're going to watch this on a week-to-week basis and kind of see where we end up. Again, please feel free to contact us if you need to. But again, we would like at this point for you to be looking to your building principals. We'll be coming forward with some slides probably tomorrow after our teachers consult with us about what they would like to see. And that way you'll be able to see directly the kinds of programs and opportunities that we're creating on behalf of our students. So stay tuned for tomorrow's show with our students in need. And I want to thank our distinguished guests for coming in today and putting together a really nice program for our kids in a very, very unique situation. So thank you all.